Hello IT freaks and welcome back to another video. Alright, in this video I'm going to explain about the roles, what the roles are in a server, why do we need those roles, and a little bit about features and some other options in Server Manager. Alright, so if we look at the top right, you can see these options here in Server Manager. The server manager will execute automatically once you start Windows Server. So if we go to manage here, we have the option to add roles and features. The difference between roles and features is roles are the main purpose of the server. If we want the server to become a DNS server, a domain controller for Active Directory, I'm going to explain that later. A fact server, print server, whatever server we want this to become. This is what the role, that's the role of this server. And features is additional features or functionalities that we can add to this server, but not essentially the main purpose of this. If we go here, as I explained later, these are the specs of this local server that we're managing, and these are all the other servers that were added to this server manager console. We only have one at the moment, so that's the only one that we can manage, but we can add more and have the same in a deeper level. What's going to happen is if you are signed in into the same domain, you can right click on let's say you have a bunch of servers that are part of the same domain. You can right click the server, and let's say we want to open a PowerShell window, and you can do it directly from here. And right now, obviously, we don't have more servers, so but I'm gonna show that in other videos. And so from here, we can add those additional server. You can add it manually, type in the IP here of the server or computer name, or from here, once you install Active Directory and add those machines or those servers to the into that domain, you will be able to add them from here. You can also, once you have 100, 200, 300 servers, it's difficult to manage them. So if you have 3 DNS servers, if you have 2 fact servers, 20 file servers, then you want to create groups so it's easy to manage them. It's easier to manage them from here. So you can just select the ones that you want to add and add group name 123, click OK, and that will create another group of servers here. Uh, for me, it's annoying every time I sign in to this Windows machine or any Windows server that this pops up, because this is very helpful, but sometimes I just need to manage other stuff. So you can click manage here, go to server manager properties, and say, hey, I don't, please do not start automatically at login. And the next time I log in, it won't pop up automatically. This, or it won't execute server manager. And you can also specify the refresh period in minutes. So we can say like, okay, in every minute, it will refresh all the servers here that I have added. Uh, if we continue here, this list is all the tools that we can use to manage this server. We can open the registry. I'm going to explain that later, but all the configurations, let's say you have an iPhone or Android and you have the settings menu, or every change that or everything that you do or you make, in Windows Server, the settings are saved here. So once you know how to manage or how to edit registry, then you can you this is more like advanced level. You can do like a lot of stuff that you cannot do via the graphics, like the GUI interface, graphics interface. Here we can component services, so we can see all the components that can, well, event manager, all the components is more like services and um, specific options for services that you can manage from here. I'm going to explain just a little bit about each tool so we don't waste too much time on this. We have computer management. This is the most helpful window of all. You have all the things here. You can see what the shares are, the task scheduler if you want to automate something. Let's say, oh, okay, I want to Google Chrome empty the cache every weekend. So let me create a task scheduler task here. So it will execute every weekend and it will delete that cache. We have event viewer. I have an error with X application and I want to see what the error was, or I want to see if that executed, uh, the execution was fine. You can manage everything through here. Well, not manage, but see all the logs. I want to see if the X user or Maria logged on successfully yesterday. So here you can see all those logs, all those everything that the server does. Basically, it will be added to the log. Not everything, but most of it, mostly errors. Share folders, I explained that. This is the shared folders that all their computers can connect to it and see what it's inside. The sessions, you can see whoever is currently connected to that folder. Open files, you can see specifically which file is being opened right now for another external computer. Obviously, if you have 40 users and this is, for example, a file server, this one will uh, take a little bit to load because obviously we'll be loading many entries, but we have many files open at the same time. Users, you can manage users from here. Groups, you can create groups. I will explain the purpose of each group in another video. Performance, you can monitor the performance and collect data, check the reports, see, okay, let's say this one of the roles is Hyper-V role, which is a virtualization server. So once you have a virtualization server, why this virtual machine is taking too much CPU? I can set a monitor on that VM and check at what time it goes up and takes 100% CPU. And that's the performance tool. Device manager, you can see all the devices that belongs to well, this machine. Obviously, we are using Hyper-V. Uh, this machine is inside Hyper-V, which is a virtualization application made by Microsoft. So that's why if you say, okay, which network adapter I have? Oh, I have a Hyper-V network adapter, but actually my physical machine doesn't have a Hyper-V network adapter. It has a Broadcom maybe. Um, Printers, I'm gonna show here which processors, cores, everything hardware related is gonna be here. Server backups, they can be managed from here. Disk management, also you can see which disk, partitions, volumes. I'm gonna explain that later. Services and applications, additional services, WMI. There are some tricks. Once you have the knowledge of WMI, you can do a lot of fun stuff in Windows, but that's also I'm going to explain later. And this is the most useful tool from this. Then you have to defragment, disk cleanup. Yeah, I explained already. Event viewer, the same thing. It's is event viewer, but on its own dedicated window. ISCOS initiator. I'm gonna explain that later, but it's to there is this protocol called ISCSI, and you can have a file server, uh, let's say in the same room, but it's a different file server, and both servers are interconnected, or all the servers in that room are interconnected via the network. And you can have the file server to run this protocol, the iSCSI protocol, and you can have this other server uh, that from here you can connect to that other file server. So basically, it's a way to connect to a file server through the network. Instead of using the SMB protocol, which is when you add network here, network location, and I add a shared folder. Um, this iSCSI protocol is different because once I add a shared folder in the network, I'm using an application connecting to another application. So it's more like upper level based connectivity. And now, if you use iSCSI, you are directly reading and writing to the disk in the file server. Then we have local security policy. This is all the policies that security policies, public keys, certificates, everything, all those settings can be managed from here. Uh, let's say I don't want this user to connect to this computer, so I can add that user here. Things like that. Everything here can be managed via group policy. Once you have the server in a domain, so this is only used if your server is not in a domain. You can use these settings. And then we have Microsoft Azure Services. This is new. Windows 2019 introduced it. You can monitor your Azure services from here. ODBC 32-bit, ODBC 64. It's a way to connect or interact with application databases. Performance monitor, I already explained it. It's in part of obviously computer management. That's why this is the most helpful window of all. Recovery drive, if you want to recover a drive that you previously backed up. Registry editor, it's open to registry, I already explained. Resource monitor, already explained. Services, everything's part of computer management. If you want to access only that particular window, you can select. That's why it's like same thing, but from here you can access it mostly everything. System configuration, you can edit boot settings here, fix boot, or go to safe mode if you want. System information, you can see all the specs from the system. Task scheduler, already explained. Windows Defender, you can execute it from here. Windows Defender Firewall, sorry. Windows Defender is the antivirus, and Windows Defender Firewall is its firewall, or with a Windows Firewall. You can edit, add, remove rules here. Windows Memory Diagnostic, check the memory. If something is corrupted in the memory. Windows PowerShell, you have Windows PowerShell 32-bit. Don't get confused with x86. Every time you see x86, it's similar to 32-bit systems. And Windows Server Backup if you want to back up the specific volume. You can zoom out, zoom in if you had issues with your vision. uh, and the help. Obviously, the version, you can see the version. It hasn't changed much since 2016. So, all right. So if we go to roles, sorry guys, I had to step away for a second. Well, so I'm gonna explain now a little bit about each role. Um, the first thing that you do once you have the server configured, time, and NIC card, the IP, then you need to go here and add the role. What's gonna be the purpose of this server? As I explained earlier. Let's click next. I like to click here. So every time I'm checking the role or adding a new role, it won't ask me for the same thing. You can read through, but I already know what it says. So always it's going to be role based or feature based installation. If you select remote desktop services installation, this is the part of implementing a role and also an environment. But I'm going to explain that in later videos. Right now, we're going to select role based. Usually, the only server that we have in this server manager console is the one that we are now. So that's the only one. Select here. Also, you can, let's say that I want to add a role inside a particular server, but that server, it's a virtual machine or a virtual server, but that's off. Like, let's say that it's been off for a while, but I want to turn it on and add a new role. So if you don't have to turn that on to add the role. You can go here and select virtual hard disk, and you can go and select the virtual hard drive of that particular virtual machine, and you can add that role. So the next time it will turn on that virtual machine, the role will be added. So let's click next. Obviously, we're gonna select. We don't want to like virtual disk. All right. So here are the roles of Windows. We have the Active Directory certificate services. That's to manage certificates. I'm gonna explain that again in another video, but basically certificates are used to communicate services, applications, or encrypt files. So everything that it's encryption, it's related to certificate. Also, um, it can provide, or let's say, some kind of entitlement for a specific machine. Then we have the most popular of all domain services. Once you install this role to a server, uh, you can obviously become that a read-only domain controller or domain controller. Domain controller, it's called to a server that has this role installed. And what this is going to do is, hey, this server is going to be the one that contains all the users. All the machines that belongs to my organization are going to be managed by this server. So basically, this server is going to become the controller. That's why it's called domain controller. And you can manage all the users, you can manage all the machines, all the databases, and authentications for applications from this server. Then we have federation services. Once you have domain services installed, if you want to communicate with an external identity system similar to domain services, but you want to authenticate using your domain as the main identity system, or identity system is the system that controls the users, let's say, simple steps. It can be services accounts as well, it can be, but let's say the users. And so this is a service that interacts or interconnects those, create the connection between those domains, or those between the application. It could be application, it could be another domain, to uh, to become yours as the identity system. Lightweight directory services is similar to domain services, but only to, like the name implies, is lightweight. It doesn't have all the features. It's just a simple way of managing objects in Active Directory. Right management services. This one helps you to encrypt. It's not encrypt, but let's say locked in, or um, yeah, we can say like encrypt office files or applications that are called RMS, or right management service aware applications, where you can, once you lock those files, if you take that file out of your organization, or if you move that file to a computer that is not part of the domain or Active Directory, that file will be encrypted. So that application will execute the file, but it will say, hey, stop. You are not part of the domain and you are not authorized to open this file. So it won't open. It will be encrypted. Um, Device health attestation. This communicates with all the servers and creates reports to say, hey, all the servers are fine. So you can assess the health of the devices, basically, and see if they get compromised, if the boot it's not it's corrupted, and other situations. DHCP server, this is pretty well known, is to distribute IPs in a network. So I want to this server to distribute the IPs of all the devices that connect to my network. This this role. DNS, when you access the internet, in basics words, when you access the internet and you say google.com, you're actually not accessing google.com, you're accessing an IP. But the browser asks the DNS server, hey, what's the IP for google.com? And it will give them the IP. So you will see google.com, but actually you are communicating to an IP, and that IP it's actually belongs to a server. And the browser also say, because you can have multiple websites in one server. It's the same to say you can have multiple websites under one IP. So the browser also sends which name was used. Uh, so if you have Google, if you have Yahoo in the same under the same IP, the DNS will say, hey, it's the same IP. But the browser, when it's communicating with the server, will say, okay, this guy wants to access Google, but it's the same IP. And or this other guy wants to access Yahoo, it's the same IP. That's what the DNS purpose, translate domains or names to IPs. Fax server, the name implies, you can this become a fax server and process faxes via this server. You file services and storage services. These are multiple roles that obviously they interconnect between each other. Those all of those are part of this same file and SCSI services. But once you enable them, there are multiple options. Let's say file server. You once you click here on their tools, obviously every time you install a new role, it will also install the management tool here. So you can, it will show more options here. So let's say I install the DNS server. it will say the DNS management tool will show up. So I could click on it and it will show me the DNS settings and all that. So if I click file server, it will show me another option, and I will be able to monitor more the changes of those files under if this is going to become a file server. A branch cache, once the users or once you become this server a file server, if you want to this machine to cache part of those files, so they don't have to always go to other server asking for downloading those files. Let's say you have 3 file servers, and one of them only has the file A, and you have a lot of people accessing file A. So you can become this other server a branch cache. So it will the once it becomes a branch cache, it will say, oh, many people is accessing this file A. So let me download file A under my files, and I can distribute the load of all of those people asking for the same file between two. So it's basically a cache server for the network files or for the file shares. Data duplication, you can duplicate the data between servers automatically. DFS namespace is similar. You are creating a name, share folder name called, I don't know, 123 dot domain. Always needs to be dot domain. It can be whatever. Obviously, it can be whatever name your domain is. But let's say your domain is x.com or x.local, because um, obviously in the past Microsoft recommended to use the local, uh, but now the local is actually an external domain that you like websites. You can access the local websites, so it's public now. It's not internal. So what Microsoft recommends now is to use your business domain, but with an internal subdomain. Let's say you have your company's peter.com. So your Active Directory domain or your internal domain for Windows, it can be internal.peter.com. So if you access internal.peter.com from outside, you won't see anything. But if you access from inside the network, and the DNS will recognize it because you have a DNS internally that represents this subdomain. So what this does is, okay, I have a shared folder called xxx.internal.peter.com, and let's say you have file server A, and that file server contains this file x or this folder, sorry, this folder xxx. Now, um, if you use the server name instead of the domain name to access that folder, the issue what's going to happen if that server it's down or the IP changes, you won't be able to access the folder anymore. So that's what the DFS namespace is for. So you can select which servers have this file in what location, and doesn't matter the server, you will be always accessing using the same address here. DFS replication, same thing, but it will help. It's not the same thing, but sorry, but it will help this one to replicate those files automatically. So on this one, you are pointing, okay, you're manually copying the folder and say, okay, this will point to these 2 servers because these 2 servers has that folder duplicated. But in this one, you can say, okay, let's link those 2 folders from those 2 servers so it will automatically replicate. So if something changes in one of them, it will be replicated to the other one. File server resource manager, you can manage the resources and classify files and folders. Say, okay, in this file, you can only, obviously, let's say your disk is 100 gigs, but you only want users to use 10 gigs in this folder. So you can easily install this role and you can manage the folders or how much of the space you want to be consumed by specific folders. BSS, if you're not familiar with BSS, BSS is a service that runs, it can be, uh, it can run on Windows 11, Windows 10, but basically what it does, it records all the changes on your drive. If you change a file or if you do something that changes the file structure, you can say like, okay, every hour or every 15, well, the minimum I think is 14 minutes. Every 14 minutes, it will take a screenshot of my drive, and everything that changes between now and in 14 minutes more, it will record that snapshot and it will allow me to access that moment. Obviously, it will take the empty space of your drive. You won't be able to see it, what part of the drive it took. But that's the best way of um, doing backups without actually doing backups. You're taking screenshots of the drive and saving them in the empty space of the drive. If you have, let's say you are almost full, obviously the it will take a snapshot and probably the next snapshot won't be able to take it because the changes are too many and the empty space left is too low. That's a good service to have enabled. Then we have the iSCSI target server. I explained that earlier. You have the initiator, which is the one that initiates the connection, and you have the target server, which is the destination or the server that contains the disk, the actual file server that contains the disk that you will map via to the initiator. Obviously, the difference between SMB or subfolders I already explained is this one you are reading and writing directly to the disk or virtual disk, and the other one you are accessing a folder or a file. So one is the application layer, the other one is more like layer 4. Um, then we have, well, the target storage provider. You can also manage BSS via there and map the virtual drive to become the BSS or VDS for this server. Um, NFS, similar to SMB. S, remember guys, SMB is when I click here and I want to add, let's say this, I have another server that is sharing a folder called data, and I can type the IP of that server and the folder, and it will, I will be able to access that folder if I've had their credentials or I am inside the domain. But with NFS, you can do exactly the same thing, but you will be accessing using NFS protocol. So NFS protocol, the file explorer won't detect it, but NFS protocol is a protocol used by Linux. So if you want a Linux device to access the files on this server or the folders on this server, you can enable the NFS service here or role, and you will be able to access. from a Linux machine to this server files. Work folders, people don't use it much, but it's a way to, well, um, you can use work folders to, well, host user files and keep that like synchronized. So let's say I have a work folder called data, and if I want everyone to have the same folder on their machines synchronized with the one on this server, I can enable this server's work folders and everything. If I put a file inside that folder, that is a work folder, the other machines will detect, oh, there's a new file, and they will synchronize. And if any of those machines are offline, you can still access that file. So it's like a OneDrive sync, but using this server as the SharePoint or the OneDrive server. Always this service is always installed. You can install it. Host Guardian service. This is to encrypt machines. Let's say you have multiple Hyper-V servers or Hyper-V hosts, and you only want two of them to execute VM or virtual machine A. So you can use this role to manage that authorization and encrypt those VMs. So only the servers authorized to execute those VMs will be able to execute them or run the VM. Hyper-V, this is the role, as previously explained, that if you want to become this server to be able to run virtual machines. Um, Network policy, you can manage network policies, or let's say we can configure with Windows. We also can configure VPNs and other type of network um, authorization services. I'm going to explain that later, but there are some network devices that are compatible with this service that you can easily, depending on certain factors, authorize um, that user. For example, I have a user in my domain called Peter, and I have a VPN and a firewall. So that user, it's uh, in far away from here, and that person wants to use VPN to connect to the firewall. But the firewall needs to communicate with the domain to see if that user is actually a user enabled in the domain. So this service, network policy, is in charge of communicating, let's in that situation, with the firewall and say, okay, let's see, is that a user of the domain? So that NPS service will talk to the Active Directory domain and say, okay, yeah, it's a user in the domain. Then you can also set other policies, say, okay, is that a computer that it's part of the domain? Is it yes or no? And it will confirm and communicate those network devices with the domain, depending on the policies that you set. Print and document services. If you want this to become a print server, you can add the printers here and this server, and all the other computers can talk to this server to start printing. So, and this server will talk to the printers. This is useful to have a control of the printers in one place, centrally, or manage the printers easily from here, or control the documents that are sent to printers or other devices. That's what this role is for. And you have remote access. This is to create VPNs or NAT. So you can become this server, the VPN server, and or the NAT server that execute direct access as well. I can explain that later. Direct access, it's a way of VPN, but directly um, it's fully integrated with Active Directory. But this is if you want to become the server a VPN server, that's the way to go. Remote desktop services. This is a huge topic, but basically you can um, let's say you have many users and they have their own personal computers, but you don't want them to access the business or the network with their computers, so you can install create like multiple remote desktop services servers, sorry, and so they can access those servers, and from those servers they can see their desktop, their apps and all that inside the computer. So it doesn't matter what computer they have, they can remote access to the desktop and in the remote desktop server. There's also remote apps. It can be it's called also a virtual desktop infrastructure, and it can be many things, but it's a huge topic. Then we have volume activation services. This is related to when you have a volume license and you there are servers that manage the activation of Windows. So this is licensing and activation of Windows mostly. IIS, this server can become an IIS server or a web server. IIS is the framework, the web service made by Microsoft. Um, Windows deployment services, if you want to easily deploy Windows images on machines, let's say you want to format um, 500 machines, but you cannot manually do it because it will take you a lot of time. So you can easily create your own image of Windows based on the requirements of your business or your organization or whatever configuration that you want for that Windows, that those 500 machines to have. And you can install this and configure that image. So when they boot up, those machines boot up, in my video, in my first video, I explained the PXE boot. That's the first, if there is no drive or no operating system running or installed in the disk of those machines, the PXE boot will try to look for something to boot on the network. So this is what this role is for. So you can easily, when you connect to a brand new machine to the network, you execute the PXE boot, and it will look for a server or a WDS, Windows Deployment Service, and it will say, okay, this is the image that I need to install, and it will install Windows automatically. It will boot and install Windows automatically via the network. So you just have to turn on the computer and connect it to the network where the WDS service is. Obviously, there are some other things that you need to do, like configure the DHCP. So once they get the IP, they will see the server, but that's another topic. And here, finally, Windows Server Updates services. This is to manage, you can manage the Windows updates from all organization from, let's say, from this server. So we install this on this server, and this becomes the Windows Server Update Manager, or you can easily manage all the Windows updates, and you can authorize, let's say, a brand new window, a brand new, or sorry, a new update was released yesterday, and that update is breaking all the windows. Then you can, if this is the Windows Server Update server, then you can, okay, let's deauthorize that, so my organization doesn't get affected by that update. So you can authorize and deauthorize or force updates on servers or machines in your environment. And these are the features. I'm gonna explain that in later video. I hope you enjoyed. Sorry that it took me so long to explain, but this is it. Please subscribe and click the like button. That will help me. Thank you.